World War I. This occurred between 1914 and 1919. It was a war in which all the major powers of Europe were fighting. It was also called the Great War because they never thought that another war of this magnitude, could ever happen again. Unfortunately, we know it did because we also had World War II. But World War I is still known as the Great War. When we look at why or what things led up to the war, we find that there were three reasons. The first was imperialism. With imperialism, countries were taking territory for their country and subjecting this territory to their country's rule. In other words, when we talked about the age of exploration, and we talked about how Europeans during the age of exploration were going to these other lands and they were claiming them for the power of the gold and the glory. This was a stage of imperialism, and they were subjecting these new countries to the European rule or the country's rule. Then the second reason is militarism. With militarism, it is European countries continued to grow by military power. Basically, it was a fight to rule arms. Every power in Europe was trying to build their military and come up with the latest weapons and technology in defense of their country, which then led to nationalism. And with nationalism, it was great pride and strong support of the rights of one's country. As an American, you should have nationalism for your country, believing that America is one of the greatest countries in the world. I believe that, and I know many other people who are Americans do believe that. Other European countries felt the same thing, and they were fighting against who is the better of the countries. It was almost like watching NFL when we argue about NFL or when we argue about Carolina and Duke basketball. Which one is better? With nationalism, it was more about the countries. Which country is better and why? These three reasons led up to World War I because Europeans argued, or the European powers argued and fought for over 40 years on those three reasons: imperialism, militarism, and nationalism. But the spark that led to the war, that really started it, was in June of 1914. The Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated by a political organization, or a member of a political secret organization in Serbia, who they had been fighting back and forth for quite some time. So of course, what happens, Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia for the assassination. Well, when Serbia got blamed, they said, okay, no problem. However, they had one more thing. Because World War I was a classic case of one thing led to another. So of course, when the assassination happened, Austria-Hungary accused Serbia of committing the assassination and planning it that way and allowing this secret organization to do this. And Serbia said, no, we didn't. But at the same time, they had what we call an alliance. They had alliances, which is a partnership or supporter or your backup, your friend, supposedly, of two or more countries. Those are alliances. Today, we meet alliances with Great Britain, with France, with Italy, with many others. We also have our own enemies, as we all know. During World War I, we had two sets of alliances that were really fighting this battle. We had the Central Powers Alliance, who were Germany, Austria, and Turkey. And then we had the Allies, who were Great Britain, France, Russia, Serbia, and Italy. Now, with this, it is a classic case of one thing leads to another. After the assassination of Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Austria-Hungary was, of course, angry with Serbia. So what did they do? They declared war on Serbia. And as you can see here, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Well, Serbia is part of all of these alliances with Great Britain, France, Russia, and Italy. So what happens? Well, then Great Britain declares war on Austria-Hungary. And then Germany declares war on Great Britain. And then they declare war on France. And then Turkey feels as though they have to get into it, and they go to declare war on France as well. And then France declares war on Turkey. So these alliances, these two separate powers, Central Powers and the Allied forces, or your allies, really began to explode in a series of 4 days. War took place. One country declared war on another. Another country declared war on another because they were allies with one another. And the next thing you knew, you had all of these European countries fighting against one another in what we call the Great War, or World War I. Now, everybody is probably asking, well, I know the United States was in that. Well, yes, the United States did enter into World War I, but they did not enter until 1917. That was almost a year and a half before the war ended. They tried to stay neutral until then. However, things happened. Things occurred that the United States felt they could no longer stay out of it, and they also entered the war. Next, we'll talk about the causes and effects, the effects of the war, and we'll even examine some of the events that took place.